Hello and welcome to part 2 of lesson number 3 in Unit 5, Solving Quadratic Equations in our grade 10 academic math class. So in this lesson we are exploring the quadratic formula, which we use when we have a quadratic equation that has x's in more than one location but is not factorable. I should also mention that you can use the quadratic formula on any quadratic, whether you're going to be rearranging or taking square roots, whether even if it's factorable, the quadratic formula will work. It's just you have to remember the conditions, and the conditions are, as I said over here, that you have standard form on one side of the equation and a zero on the other. So it needs to be expanded out. It can't be like in any sort of version of like factored form or vertex form or anything like that. If you were to expand it out into standard form, no matter whether you could have factored it or should have maybe rearranged and square rooted, it'll still work, which is a nice thing about the quadratic formula. So in our first example, we saw that you can end up with two solutions, as we did with x equaling 2/3 and x equaling -1. In our second example, we actually had no real solutions, which you get when you have a negative value under the radical sign when you work it out. And now we're on to example number 3. So let's get a look at her. So we have here 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. So this is in standard form. It's set equal to 0, so that's looking great. Let's get our a, b, and c values locked down. So the a value is the coefficient in front of the quadratic term, which is 4. Our b value is the coefficient in front of the b term, or sorry, in front of the linear term, which is 4. And our c value is the constant term, which is going to be no variable, and it is a 1. So let's substitute in. Again, just sort of keep doing it here. We have x equals, now I'm not going to rewrite the formula this time. I'm going to do substitution in sort of real time here. So negative b is a -4 plus or minus the square root, oops, that's a messy square root of 4 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a's. There we go. Okay. And now we are going to, as I did last time, I'm just going to evaluate the stuff under the radical sign, sort of all in one fell swoop there. So that's going to give me 4 squared minus 4, whoops, calculator mistake on my part, sorry. So 4 squared minus 4 times 1 equals 0. That makes sense. All over 8. Now, this is a sort of a third option here, is under the radical sign, this time we have a 0. That's okay. The square root of 0 is going to be 0, which means that we're going to have -4 plus or minus 0 all over 8. Now, in this case, the two options are going to be identical. So x is going to equal -4 plus 0 over 8, which is going to equal -1/2. The second option is x equals -4 minus 0 all over 8. And that will also equal -1/2. So in this case, we actually have one solution, even though I've sort of divided it up to make it appear as 2. If you have a 0 under the radical sign, know that there will only be one solution, or I guess 2 identical solutions is a different way of saying that. So that is a third possible way that this could turn out. In example A, we saw 2 answers. In example B, we saw no answers. And in example C, we saw one solution, one answer. Let's move on to D. D has just a little bit of work for us to do. And again, this is a common mistake for students to just go, this is A, this is B, and this is C. But students who do that have jumped over the fact that the set of conditions under which you use the quadratic formula are to have all 3 terms on the same side. So what we need to do is transpose this -2 over to join the other 2 terms by adding 2 to both sides. So we have 3h squared plus 8h plus 2 equals 0. And now we can go about getting our a, b, and c values. So a, the coefficient in front of the quadratic term, which is going to be 3. B, the coefficient in front of the linear term, which is h. Whoops, that's the highlighter. H is 8. And c is equal to the constant term, which is going to be 2. So now we are going to just substitute in, and off we go. So we have x is equal to, and again, I'm going to do this in real time, so negative b, that'll be -8. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a's. And let's evaluate what's going on under the radical sign. Again, all in one big step here, so let's type this out. We have 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2 equals 40 all over 6. Now, depending on what you're doing with a question like this, leaving it as the square root of a number that's not, up in our first example, it was nice, it was 25, right? So that came out to 5, and that was sort of an easier calculation for us. Here, there's no nice, easy square root to 40. It's got a decimal and it'll be gross. So how do we go about using that? Well, in some questions, you can just leave it like this. You could say that, well, one of the answers is going to be x equals -8 plus root 40 all over 6, and the second answer will be x equals -8 minus root 40 all over 6. Depending on what you're trying to do, this is totally fine, but some questions are going to want you to go ahead and figure out what the decimal answer is for this. So for us, again, the calculation is done in an important way, knowing that you have to finish these numerators before you get to the denominators, or division by the denominators. So I'm going to type this out. I'm not going to use brackets. I'm just going to use -8 plus the square root of 40, and I'm going to hit a hard equals, and then that gives me -1.67544. I don't want to write this down because I don't want to have to round it. I'm just going to leave it in the display on my calculator, and then I'm going to divide by 6, and that's going to equal -0. Let's go to 2 decimal places, so -0.28 approximately. And let's work the second example. So second example, again, is -8. This time subtract root 40. Again, I'm going to hit an equals here, and that gives me -14.324555, etc. I'm not going to write it down because I want to continue the calculation without rounding. So I'm going to here just hit divide by 6, and that's going to give me x is equal to approximately 2.39. And there you go. So as I said, sometimes it doesn't hurt to leave it at this step here, depending on what you're trying to do with the question. If the question asks you to go all the way through and figure out the decimal answer, just typing it into your calculator will get you there. So that is the quadratic formula. Yeah, just go through the homework. If you have any questions, obviously email me. I've tried to outline some of the common places where students make mistakes. So again, if you're struggling, you can watch the lesson a second time. If you're still not sure, like I said, email me and I can put together a video of some of the homework questions being solved. So that's it. Good luck on the homework for lesson 3, and we'll see you in lesson number 4.